The victims' groups this week called on her to stand down and resign. She needs to regain their confidence. She needs to give a very clear timetable as to when she will take action in this House and elsewhere. Will the Minister now make it clear when that will happen?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I thought I heard just now the Secretary of State doing a pretty good job of showing the personal commitment and also the urgency with which he's treating this. I'm afraid I can't add any more detail to the timetable, but I hope everybody here will have understood and heard the passion in her voice and the determination to move this forward promptly and swiftly.
Bob Stewart.
Number 9, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable and gallant friend gave a very powerful speech on this on Monday, and I would encourage anybody here who hasn't heard it to go back and listen again. I think we both agree, he and I, that the current situation isn't working for anyone. The question isn't whether things need to change, because they clearly do, but how. So we have laws which work for police veterans as well as armed forces, for unionists and for nationalists, for victims and their families on all sides of the community, and which bring truth and justice and closure so society can move on. We will bring forward proposals as soon as possible.
Bob Stewart.
As an ex-soldier, now a Member of Parliament, I'm ashamed. Ashamed that my government hasn't sorted this matter out. I ask the Minister, and especially the Secretary of State, who's been in post longer, how much longer before it can be sorted out, and are you not ashamed?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable and gallant friend, having served himself in Northern Ireland, speaks with huge authority in this area, and I suspect this is something which successive governments need to share some blame for failing to fix over many years, and it is clearly, as I said in my initial answer, a situation which cannot be allowed to continue. It is not right, it is not just, and it must be sorted out as promptly as it can. On that, I hope I'm sure that he and I both agree.
Mr. Gavin Robinson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It was with regret yesterday we got a revelation from government through written ministerial statement rather than an oral statement about their proposals for the way forward, and we should hang our head in shame that we intend to treat service personnel who served in Northern Ireland differently from those who served overseas. When I questioned the Attorney-General on this issue on the 31st of January, he said clearly that to treat service personnel differently would be plainly wrong. He was right, Minister, wasn't he?
Mr. Speaker, the important thing here is that for the servicemen and women who served under Operation Banner, as we've heard repeatedly in both the urgent question last week and the Westminster Hall debate on Monday, for those servicemen and women, it felt the same no matter what. Our challenge, though, is to say that if we're going to come up with an answer which will work when it gets inevitably taken to court by the lawfare-mongers, that we have to have something which works on the basis of the different legal starting points for things that happened in the UK as opposed to things that happened abroad, but which end up at an answer which feels the same to our servicemen and women and provides the same robust protections to them no matter what.
Order. Questions to the Prime Minister. John Woodcock.
Question 1, Mr. Speaker.
The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today marks 2 years since the Manchester Arena attack. It was a cowardly and sickening attack that deliberately targeted innocent and defenceless children. Members from across the House will want to join me in sending my thoughts and prayers to the families and friends of all the victims. And I'm sure members will also want to join me in paying tribute to the immense bravery and courage that the emergency services showed that night. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
John Woodcock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know the whole House will want to associate themselves with the words she has just spoken about the Manchester attack. Now, she may not have long left, and good luck with those meetings later today, but she can act now against the return of banned chemical weapons. British experts are this morning investigating a suspected chlorine attack by al-Assad in Idlib. If it is proved, will she lead the international response against the return of this indiscriminate evil?
Well,
Prime Minister.
The honourable gentleman is right to raise the issue of the evil of the use of chemical weapons. We, of course, acted in Syria with France and the United States when we saw chemical weapons being used in Syria. We, of course, suffered the use of chemical weapons here on the streets of the United Kingdom and took a robust response supported by our international friends and allies. And we condemn all use of chemical weapons. We're in close contact with the United States. We're monitoring the situation closely. And if any use of chemical weapons is confirmed, we'll respond appropriately. But our position is clear. We consider Assad incapable of delivering a lasting peace, and his regime lost its legitimacy due to its atrocities against its own Syrian people.
Antoinette Sandbat.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Prime Minister agree that energy efficiency measures are critical in tackling climate change? Bringing every home up to an EPC C standard could save 25% of electricity generation, the equivalent of 6 Hinkley Point nuclear power stations. It could save every family £270, and it could potentially pay for itself by generating £1.27 for every pound invested in it.
Prime Minister.
Well, I think my honourable friend has made an excellent point, and we, like her, absolutely recognise the importance of this issue. So the government is committed to improving energy efficiency in 2.5 million homes by 2030, and our aim is to bring 2.5 million fuel-poor homes up to an Energy Performance Certificate C rating by 2030. And as my honourable friend has said, this will indeed help to save energy and also bring down bills.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I join the Prime Minister in commemorating all the victims of the Manchester bombing 2 years ago. Our thoughts are with the friends and the family of all those that were killed, the survivors, and of course the emergency service workers who gave such heroic service that night. They live with the horrors of this for the rest of their lives, and 10:31 tonight will be a very poignant moment for many people in Manchester. Mr. Speaker, I also want to pay tribute to the last survivor of the Hull headscarf revolutionaries, Yvonne Blenkinsop. She's visiting Parliament today. She led a campaign for basic safety on the UK's fishing fleets in the 1960s, and as a result, many lives were saved. I think people like her have made such an enormous contribution to our national life, they should be recognised for it. I also, Mr. Speaker, want to express on behalf of the Labour Party my outrage that the government has again failed our steel industry, putting 5,000 jobs at risk in British Steel, 20,000 more in the supply chain. This government has failed those people, and even at this late stage, and there is a statement later on today, must step in to save those jobs. Mr. Speaker, could I ask the Prime Minister, why are schools having to close early on Friday afternoon due to spending cuts?
Prime Minister.
Can I first of all say to the right honourable gentleman, because he has raised the issue of British Steel, and obviously we recognise that this is a worrying time for the thousands of dedicated British steel workers and their families, but also those in the supply chain and local communities. We have indeed, the government has been working tirelessly with the company, with its owner, Greybull Capital, and lenders to explore all potential options to secure a solution for the company. We showed through the ETS agreement that we were willing to act, but we can only act within the law. And it is clear that it would be unlawful to provide a guarantee or loan on the terms requested by the company. We will be working with the company and others and the official receiver in the days and weeks ahead to ensure that we can pursue every step to secure the future of the operations at Scunthorpe, Skinning Grove and on Teesside. My right honourable friend, the Chancellor, has also agreed an indemnity for the official receiver to enable British Steel to continue to operate in the immediate future. There are no job losses at this time, and the official receiver has already said staff will continue to be paid and employed. And my right honourable friend, the Business Secretary, will be updating the House in a statement later this afternoon. And on the issue of schools, as the right honourable gentleman knows, we are putting record levels of funding into our schools.
Well, that would explain why 26 schools close early on a Friday every week, because they don't have enough money to keep themselves open. And, Mr. Speaker, there are more than 1,000 schools across England that are turning to crowdfunding websites with a wish list of things they want to raise money to buy. Really exotic things like pencils, like glue, like textbooks. Why are they forced to do this if they allegedly have enough money in the first place?
Prime Minister.
Right, honourable gentlemen, as I've said here before, and I've just quoted, we are putting record levels of funding into our schools. We've also put in place to ensure a fairer distribution of the funding between our schools. We are giving every area more money for every pupil in every school. But what is important in our education system is not just about what government puts in, it's about what quality of education is received by the children. There are more children in good and outstanding schools, the disadvantage attainment gap has been narrowed, and record rates of disadvantaged young people are going to university. That's a record to be proud of.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, I don't know if the Prime Minister had a chance to listen to or read the words of the General Secretary of the National Association of Head Teachers. He said, and I quote, "The fact that so many schools are doing this should be ringing serious alarm bells for the government." The Prime Minister doesn't seem to be aware of the crisis that's facing so many in education at the present time. So can she be very clear with the House? Has per pupil funding risen or fallen since 2010?
Prime Minister.
Right, honourable gentlemen, we're giving every area more money for every pupil in every school. But why are we able to do that? It's because the Conservatives have taken a balanced approach to our economy and managed our finances well. What would Labour give us? 1,000 billion extra pounds in borrowing. That would mean higher taxes, fewer jobs and less money to go into our schools.
Jeremy Corbyn.